Hello, everybody. Thank you for logging in and signing up to the IBBC Tech Forum conversation. We are today talking about how business can mitigate climate change in particular. And we have a superb panel of people. Very much like to point out that this is part of a two-day conference here in Dubai, and we're looking at how Iraq can ensure a sustainable future. The first day, of which we're a part of, has been focused on education. Lord Boateng of the UK had the opening address, and tomorrow we're going to be focusing much more on business, etc., with our key members, ministers from Iraq, the UAE, and UK speakers. We have a full house of delegates as well, which is great. The Tech Forum seeks to look at what's happening in the tech world and how it might inspire and inform Iraq on its journey towards modernity. So today we're looking at climate and the impacts and potential solutions that business technology can bring. In particular, we want to know what's the big picture for business, what's happening for business, what mechanisms are available, and how should we quantify and manage carbon emissions and mitigations and risks in each sector and country. Each panelist is going to have about 5 minutes to explain what they do in the bigger picture. Then we're going to be looking at more detailed questions of specific solutions and potentially what could be practical for Iraq. I'd like to introduce the panel. Owais Afridi, Director of Consulting from EY Sustainability Practice in the Middle East region. Batoul Husseini, who's the Executive Director of Government Affairs in the Middle East for SAP. Ahmed Gailani, Climate Researcher at the Climate Change Committee and member of Leeds University, and he's actually just published a report. Hussam Chakouf, Design Director of Trojena, which was part of NEOM, and Professor Sabih Khisaf, for the Middle East infrastructure expert, worked on Hyperloop and is also an ICE, Institute of Civil Engineers alumni. So we have some really interesting conversations coming. And I'd like to first introduce Ahmed Gailani, who's just published the report on the Energy Policy Journal, Meeting the Costs of Decarbonizing Industry, which I commit to everybody to read because it's a really fascinating document. And with more ado, over to you, Ahmed. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and thanks to the IBBC for inviting me to speak in this. So I am Ahmed Gailani, and I am a researcher at the UK Energy Research Centre, where we do multidisciplinary research into energy and social science, trying to understand what are the challenges facing the UK as we transition to net zero. And I have been seconded to the Climate Change Committee, which is the expert advisory body to the UK government and to the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, where I contribute to the modeling for the UK industrial sector. So we basically trying to understand how the UK industrial sites like cement, steel, chemicals, food and drink, lime, glass, can decarbonize by 2050 while remain competitive. So the main thing here is that we want businesses to remain competitive as they transition to net zero. So we see the climate change is happening globally, and there's no country uniform its effect. The question is then, how do we adapt to it and mitigate our emissions? So for businesses, we see the early winners are those who planned already to mitigate physical and transition risk. So how we do that at a country level, for example, for a country like the UK, we plan on a whole system level, aligning business ecosystem with local, national, and international policies and the climate scenarios and targets. So you don't want to think in isolation, because you will end up costing your business more. So we had like everything in the COP, and you basically, when you invest a $1 now, you are saving $7 for loss and damage in the future. And so we go and systematically identify and assess the risk quantitatively and qualitatively in line with other frameworks. And for businesses, they need to invest and plan, especially, for example, in resource efficiency and energy efficiency. We see these are the low-hanging fruits for the energy transition. And the plan will work best if you created a team that you have the enough courage to set it to work independently to critique what the company or indeed a country do. So for example, the UK government, although lacks action in some sectors, such as building, has done tremendously well in the power sector by encouraging the deployment of the wind turbines and other resource and other energy efficiency option. So transport, except aviation, we're also set to decarbonize by adopting electric cars. Building and industry, because they are hard to abate sector, we lack action in these sectors. So with that, I conclude my opening, Ashley.
Thank you very much indeed, Ahmed. That's really interesting. I like that figure of you put $1 in now and you save 7 for later. So that's a good return on investment. I'd like now to talk to I hope they can. If you could talk now about what you're going to do, maybe introduce yourself in case my machine looks like it is not behaving itself.
No problem. Thank you very much, Ashley. And thank you for the opportunity. Owais Afridi, as Ashley has already introduced me, I'm a director with EY. My focus is the MENA region. And within EY, I'm part of the supply chain and operations consulting practice. And more specifically, I'm a lead for the region for value chain sustainability. A bit of background. I've had first-hand experience working in Iraq. I was back then I was working for one of the major IUCs, have been based inside Iraq as well, down south, in one of the largest oil fields in the world. And that gave me, really up close and personal, rich experience of what goes on the field and the status of affairs, the state of affairs over there. I predominantly come from a supply chain and operations background, and which eventually then morphed into value chain sustainability, decarbonization, business case, decision making, and more recently, carbon pricing. And that's the angle I will be bringing in today's discussion. In terms of technology and how technology can support or enable our race towards decarbonization. If we are to categorize the different sorts of levers that we have available to us for decarbonization, we are talking about major process technology. So that requires capex investment, brownfield or greenfield. We replace or we install new types of machinery in a very simple language. Then there is process optimization. We install sensors, measurement devices, management devices. That's where we use artificial intelligence and IoT to measure and manage our operations and to optimize it as well. Then there's an option of alternate fuels, less carbon intensive fuels. So we're talking about maybe solar, green hydrogen, et cetera, et cetera. The last resort for us is any mechanism for removing carbon from the atmosphere. While there is a lot of talk around CCUS, carbon offsets, but that is actually the last resort. First, we do need to take steps to optimize our operations and to clean our operations. There's a plethora of technology across these various categories that I just defined. And the objective today, or at least my focus today, is not going to be to talk about any specific technology, because like I said, there's a variety and it's very subjective. It's absolutely very subjective, depending on the industry, depending on the company. But what is the business's main objective at the end of the day? And that is profitability. So I'm going to focus on how it can become easier to take a decision on selection of a particular technology. And that's where a concept called internal carbon pricing comes up. So that's a brief intro. Ashley, back to you.
Very much. Thank you very much. very interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more detail about that, if that's okay. Now, if we can go to Hussam Chakouf, if you're there, Hussam. Looking forward to hearing from you about your design and building insights. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Hello? Ashley, can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys? Yeah. Ashley, thanks very much for IBBC to inviting me. I mean, I've been always active member there. Just like brief introduction about myself, I used to work on Zaha Hadid for 16 years, and then I moved for the last 1.5 years to work with NEOM as a design director for Trojena. However, I mean, I left that job right now, and then I'm looking forward to join another practice in the beginning of the year. But maybe I would like to share some graphic, if you allow me, Ashley. So, sorry about that. Can you see my screen? So, just like speak about the vision that Saudi Arabia is leading in terms of what sustainability is, just to explain a bit about NEOM. NEOM, it's located in maybe the northwest corner of Saudi, and the size of NEOM is around 26,000 kilometers square. It's as big as Belgium, and it's really a country, not a city. And it's contained 5 major projects. One of them, the line, and out of region, and including maybe around 41 islands, and then Gulf of Aqaba, which contain around 120 projects over like 160 kilometers, and the Octagon, which is more like the industrial city next to the sea, and more important as well, the Trojena, which is the resorts in the mountain. This is where I used to work, and this is how Trojena it looks like. That the peak of that mountain is around 2,500, and then if you can see, there is like around 16 projects going on at the time, but as you can see, the footprint for all the Trojena, it's really minimal with the size of Trojena. We'll see like the 2 projects I want to focus on, these 2. It's the ski village, where also like is going to be the majority of, I mean, of course it's really like snow over there, but not that much, but all of that's going to be produced artificially. But how to produce the ice, it's really like important for NEOM, or use like all the renewable energy to produce all of that, as well as this is the vault. It's one of major projects. It's more like hospitality project, but then also how we are going to design the facade and the aluminium, it's an important. Just, I mean, I mentioned like in the brief introduction, we are trying into finding solutions for all of these projects. For the ski village, what we are trying to do, like how we are going to use the aluminium for all of that project, from maybe, let's say, recycle aluminiums, where you can reduce around like between 15 to 20% of the CO. And that's also like how to use a lightweight window, where we are going to produce around 24% of the weight of this windows. And then recently we're talking with a couple of, let's say, suppliers, one of them Technol, which in a way, they have already like 1.9 kilometers CO per kilogram in a way of aluminium, and that's already confirmed. Just to give like a quick introduction about that. Normally, the normal practice, like it's 8.6, this is what has been used in Europe. And then apparently like primary in the Middle East, it's 11, around the world it's 16, and then mainly in China 20. And now we are down into 1.9 or 4. This is what we are aiming, or what NEOM is really aiming to reduce all of that. Quick introduction, like what does that mean if we use this system in a building? Like the official building, I mean, if you assume it's 10,000 square meter and the facade is 100 like meter of aluminium, that means 1 kilogram is going to be 1.9 for CO, and then this is the global average, going to be 17 kilogram of the CO, and this is like you are saving around 1,500 meter, and that means you are really saving like all of that amount of trees for 80 years. This is how important really to give more importance for the sustainability, and then find a solution when you are building a building. The other issue, it's more like using let's say the technology in design, and then see and really reduce whatever not necessarily in the building. So if you can see this example, what's like a visual mock-up for potentially this building. If you can see the node, it looks, maybe I will go here. Like if you can see it, it's not solid, and that we are really focusing on 3D printing of this piece, where you focus already where you need the strengths and the structure for it, and that the rest, it's really not necessarily in a way. And this is where we are going to reduce the weight of using the aluminum in the building. Yeah, this is maybe the end of my introduction. Actually.
Thank you so much. That is so interesting. I kind of wanted you to go on and on about it, because it looks like you've reduced the carbon footprint by 8 times the average. Is the whole of the project, the NEOM project, aiming for this kind of reduction in building technologies?
Yeah, this is, I mean, technically what the aim. And then, you know, as I mentioned, the vision is there, and this is supported by His Royal Highness. And then everybody really using all possible technologies to do it. And even if that means the building cost and construction cost to be increased, this is really, it doesn't matter. It's more like to focus on the global image and do the sustainability. But, you know, I mean, we haven't built really yet. They are start construction, but all of these solutions with the suppliers and the designers, it's already on the table, and then everybody doing their best to achieve it.
And for you, do you have any clear things you want to achieve? What do you want to see from this whole project? It looks like something out of Star Wars, for starters. It looks absolutely incredible. And for you, what are you most proud about this whole thing?
To be honest, I mean, everything, I mean, look, I'll give you like, personally, this is one of the reasons, or actually it was enough potential where I left Zaha Hadid to join Trojena in particular, because everything about Trojena is innovative, starting from design and then the way of thinking and what you want to achieve as a lead in all aspects, especially also like, of course, you are going to build this building in any way, but you are making extra effort while you are going to make it more sustainable and then more environmentally. And we are, in a way, like NEOM, focusing on all different aspects in the world where you will use all the available technology. Like if you see the last example I mentioned, it's a 3D printing, that there is no real production of 3D printing for aluminum yet. And this is really a new test where NEOM supporting all the suppliers and they are pushing them to do it. I mean, of course, you know, from practicality, you need to do all the testing and everything. But this is happening. What I like about NEOM, it's innovative. They are thinking out of the box. And then at the end of the day, if they have this determination and the vision, they will achieve it.
So a quick question on that is that, will this technology be shared? I mean, who will share it with the world going forward? Or is it something that with the IP of NEOM? How will that work?
No, at the end of the day, you know, you use a supplier. Let's speak with this aluminum node. It's going to be produced by the supplier. And then, of course, they are going to test it and they're going to prove it works. And then at the end of the day, he is going to give you the warranty of the facade. Let's assume he's going to apply the facade. He will give you the warranty and then under the warranty of the general contractor. So it's going to be like a normal practice. But for you, when you say I want to build this building with the construction cost and then I want to be competitive in the market, if you add to it sustainability, that now it's going to add more cost. And then if you as a client willing to pay this extra cost to save the environment, and then you are on the right track. So it's combination between the technology, the suppliers and the client, all of them like towards to one goal, and then that's going to be achievable.
That's true of all businesses, actually, but particularly in this large scale one. Thank you so much. We might come back to you and ask you a bit more later on. I'd very much now like to go to on the subject of engineering. We have Professor Sabih Khisaf, who has worked on Hyperloop in the UAE and also is an alumni and a member of the ICE, the Institute of Civil Engineers. So, Dr. Sabih, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Ashley. As Ashley said, yeah, I'm civil infrastructure engineer, bridges. I've been involved in the construction industry for over 40 years. I've been involved within the life cycle of project from planning, design, construction, implementation, and operation. A number of projects on the planning side. I work on the Abu Dhabi Integrated Public Transport Network System and Khalifa Port and Industrial Zone in Abu Dhabi. And this was one of the first projects I worked here in the UAE. Then I worked on the Dubai Metro, Doha Metro, a number of highway projects in UK, Ireland, and the other part of like Lisbon and Portugal. Also, I spent some time working on the operation and maintenance of transport infrastructure. I worked on a number of operation and maintenance for the UK Highway Agency, also for London Underground, before moving to UAE. I think one aspect when we talk about sustainability, carbon footprint, and renewable, I think the transportation sector account for almost 1/5 of global carbon emission. And therefore, we should rethink on the way we traveling, on the way we transporting goods. The other major contributor to the carbon footprints is the construction industry. The construction industry contributes around 36% of the global carbon footprint. And therefore, we as a civil engineers, we should look at ways to reduce our carbon footprint. And unfortunately, we lag behind just above the agriculture industry in adopting the new technology, and therefore on productivity as well. And therefore, we should get our act together to work more on reducing our carbon footprint. A major contributor to our industry is the cement. Cement is the second most widely used substance on earth after water. Wherever we go, we have to use cement. We cannot live without cement. We build civilization, and therefore we have to use cement. That doesn't mean we have to use cement as it is. We should be thinking carefully and twice how we can reduce the construction industry carbon footprint and from the cement point of view. And I'm being involved on a number of projects from the IC side. As Ashley said, I'm the most recently the IC Vice President for International Institute of Civil Engineers, but currently I'm the council member for Middle East and Africa. And we as professional institution, not just qualifying people, but we contribute to the debate and solution for the construction industry. We also advise government, and mainly the government, the UK government, and we are the voice of infrastructure. And therefore, we have a big role to play in reducing the carbon footprint of our construction industry. And I mentioned on the carbon reduction for the cement. There is a project in collaboration between the Heriot-Watt University in Dubai, the Center for Smart Construction, and the UAE Ministry of Infrastructure on ways to reduce the construction industry, the carbon footprint of cement industry. And this, the work has been almost 70% already. Once the report, and we looked at all aspects, it's not just from the manufacturer, from the user, from the suppliers, and from the client point of view, and try to work a roadmap how the construction industry, cement industry can reduce the carbon footprint of the cement industry.
Thank you very much, Sabih. Very interesting to hear a little bit more about that in the next session. But I'd very much like to introduce Batoul Husseini, who is from SAP and is doing great work in the Middle East region. Over to you, Hussein.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'd like also to start by thanking everyone joining us today, especially after a very busy week of COP28 here in Dubai. For those who have been delegates between Blue Zone, Green Zone, Innovation Zone, happy day of rest. Today is the day of rest at COP28. Normally, it's incorporated into the schedule for everybody to take a moment to reflect and recharge ahead of week 2. So as we are heading towards week 2, I'd like to take this opportunity and introduce what we're doing at SAP on the sustainability journey. As SAP, as the leader in enterprise resource management, we have more than 50 years of experience helping different types of businesses across 25 industries optimizing their resources. We enable companies to achieve sustainability targets, which we have been hearing about, all the net zero targets, but we do it while unlocking further potential across the entire value chain. As a global in technology, we definitely understand and emphasize that innovation is a driving force for positive change. So what we're doing at SAP, we're looking at the R within the ERP. We're reinventing the R in ERP by embedding carbon and other sustainability resources into the core business processes. We're calculating and sharing data across the entire value chain so that we will be able to sync financials with carbon emissions in one single ledger. We're working with governments to support, advance the progress on climate, especially with technology. We need a global coherent set of policies to help us with the ESG disclosure frameworks, carbon data standardization, but we also need to look at the skills and empowerment needed for this to be a possibility. As SAP, our own net zero aims or targets, we have already achieved our carbon neutral in our own operations this year already, and we will be looking at achieving the net zero across the entire value chain by 2030. Our own net zero journey extends beyond our walls, so we work with all different types of stakeholders. We empower and support climate leaders, climate entrepreneur, youth, social justice causes, so that we can help communities deal with the effect of the global warming and the warming planet. Back to you, Ahmed.
Thank you very much. That sounds fantastic. You're already carbon neutral, and maybe there's a lot we can learn from that. But I'm getting a strong sense that the value chain is very important here, that what is embedded in the value chain, how you quantify it. I'd like to come back to Owais, if I may, just to explain a little bit about carbon pricing and how you can quantify all this. If you could take us into that. Thank you, Owais.
Sure. Thank you again, Ashley. I mean, you can talk about carbon pricing at different levels. So we can talk about the regulatory frameworks that are already in place around the world. So you've got the regional level, for example, the CBAM recently that's come online in Europe. Then you've got national level. There are several countries who have their own either carbon taxation, which is a direct carbon tax, or the ETS system, which is the emissions trading system. There are carbon pricing mechanisms that are in place at a national or or subnational level. What I mean by that is, for example, in Canada, there is carbon pricing regime at a subnational level. So every state or various states have their own. Within ETS, there are two types, basically. There's the cap and trade, and then there's the baseline and credit. But I guess the purpose is not to school everyone around what this means, basically, but it's more about the value of that it brings. What's happening is that you can't operate in isolation anymore. So in the context of Iraq, let's take example of oil. Iraq is one of the major exporters of oil. That oil is going into the international markets, and it is definitely going into jurisdictions which either already have or are soon going to implement some sort of carbon pricing at a national level, either carbon tax, which is, like I said, direct carbon tax, or the ETS system. Now, what happens to the viability and the commerciality of your product at the end of the day? It impacts it directly if you end up paying a higher premium. And I'm simplifying the language here. But if you end up paying a higher premium, you price yourself out of the market. So you really got to do something. But what do? Again, in simple language, you try to come up with a cleaner product. What does that mean? So either your product is clean in absolute terms, or you start offsetting your carbon emissions. Either way, that requires investment. And it is that investment which we are seeing, it's that decision-making, which is still lots slower than ideally. I mean, it should be a lot faster and much quicker. And given the urgency now that we are in, and like Batoul mentioned about COP28 and a lot of pledges and recent outcomes of negotiations we're all seeing coming through. But the businesses really need to do a lot more, and we keep hearing this, but they need to identify the feasibility of their decision-making. So coming back to carbon pricing, so at a national level, at a regional level, but then what really helps, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is to come up with the entity, any entity needs to come up with their own internal carbon pricing framework. What helps, the way it helps is it basically assigns a monetary value to the risks and opportunities with respect to decarbonization. And you internalize the price of carbon. So you know today what you may face tomorrow in the international markets. So you can take a decision today. If you have to do, if you have to make an investment in a process technology, in a new process technology, and ROI is not attractive enough, applying ICP will change that dynamics altogether. And you will see yourself, because what's going to happen? You don't invest today in that technology. Your product is not clean enough. Tomorrow, you either price yourself out from a commercial angle or from a regulatory angle. We don't know what the regime is going to look like in the future, and how clean or dirty your product is. So it's better to have a view today and do a future back assessment of this scenario. So if you need to invest, you invest today. There's another angle to it. So one is, if you're doing at an entity level and you are aiding your decision making through enablers like internal carbon pricing. But at a national level, if Iraq was to come up with its own regime, that is also a way of generating additional revenue in country. So coming back to entity, if the entity was to take any step, for example, in terms of carbon abatement or brownfield or greenfield capex investment, they're going to invest in Iraq. They're going to create more jobs. So the money stays in country. When it comes to taxation, if Iraq was to have its own carbon pricing regime, they're able to tax the entities, the producers, in country. So again, keeping the money in country. Because at a regional or at international level, it works same way as double taxation works. So I hope I provided some useful insights there, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Owais. That's very interesting. Two things. One is, who's actually going to ensure that this juggernaut that's coming up towards countries, what date are we looking at for change that has to be implemented in order to avoid taxation, and who is actually putting that in place? Is it the EU? Is it China? Which markets are moving towards this expectation of tariffs?
Different markets at different pace and different timelines, naturally. So I mentioned about CBAM. Oil and gas is not part of the mandate yet. in terms of CBAM. I think they've started with fertilizer and maybe with cement. But it is coming. It is happening, and it has to happen. And it's a very good tool, actually. It's a very effective tool that will enable both individual and collective action towards decarbonization.
And so it sounds also like there's an opportunity for governments and for companies to do well here. There's an upside, there's a profitability, there's a revenue aspect. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. So like I said, I mean, at a national level, if Iraq or any other country was to come up with their own carbon pricing mechanism, either carbon tax, ETS, or whatever, they're able to tax the corporations in country. So that money stays in, and it gets sets off at the international market against whichever country, whichever regime we're talking about. And at a company, at an entity level, they are able to invest money, create jobs within their geographical domain. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to come to Ahmed, who's just published a report yesterday for COP, looking at the costs to business, in particular in Britain. And there's some very interesting outcomes of that too. I think you're echoing a little bit what I was just saying. Maybe you could explain that.
Exactly. I mean, what I was saying, like regarding carbon pricing, is really interesting. And what we see in terms of the oil, especially as the main commodity for Iraq, is that it's now, according to the IEA, like the 7th or 9th cleanest in terms of emission, with Norway always like being the first or the cleanest oil that you produce. But I haven't yet seen an assessment for the Iraqi government, for example, or reports to say what they are planning in terms of the market risk for the carbon pricing. So according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IBBC, which is like well-known, guides everything, they predict in their modeling, they say in a model pathway that limits global warming to 1.5 C with no or limited overshoot, the global use of oil and gas in 2050 is projected to decline with median values of 60% and 45% compared to 2019 respectively. And that means there's a huge risk. Now, the Iraqi government doesn't have the right tools, neither they do have the capacity to create models and create policies in order to properly assess that risk, which is like the transitions for the oil industry. Bearing in mind that Iraqi population will increase by 70% by 2050. So even if you like sell at the same price, even if the demand for oil is increasing, the growing population makes it so difficult to keep business as usual. So what needs to happen, I mean, in the UK, what we do a counterfactual scenario where we assume business as usual, and then we create another scenario, we call it the decarbonized scenario. And the difference between the two, the UK government will have to have policies in order to decarbonize, according to its legally binding international agreement, which is reaching net zero by 2050. So I think there are two players here. For government, they will have to design policies based on the right scientific principles that other governments follow. And for businesses, they need to, plan early, invest in R&D, create the capacity within the company and the business in order to respond to climate change challenges. And most importantly, actually, is to enable the culture for change, because if you don't have the culture for change and respond to climate change inside the company, you will end up in the same fate as Kodak ended before. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to press you on the thing, in your report, there's quite a modest amount of extra cost and investment to actually achieve this. You're talking something like on average 0.8%. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly. So what we done in our energy policy academic journal, we modeled all of the UK industry in a decarbonized scenario, in a decarbonized world, and then we said, okay, how much that cost to the taxpayer? In the three scenarios, we either pass our cost, the decarbonization cost, all of the technologies for all the industrial sectors, even CCS, we pass all the costs to the customers, or we do like another scenario 50-50 where the government subsidize some of these technologies cost. And we found actually, compared to the opportunities that the transition will give you in terms of the job opportunities and the green jobs and other things, that other economic benefits, the cost overall will be minimal to the taxpayers as part of the transition, as you said, 0.8%, which seems not quite a lot considering the size of the UK economy.
And one of the points I just want to draw out is about competitiveness. And Owais was talking about, having cleaner energy and therefore looking at competitiveness. And the UK businesses could be quite competitive on this basis. Is that right?
I mean, we have like a lot of our industries already implemented energy efficiency measures. So, for example, the food and drink processes, chemical processes, they already invested in energy efficiency, and that is driven by, because of the electricity price in the UK is quite high compared to Europe. So the businesses are already exploring options to reduce the exposure to high energy costs. Although the emission trading system and the carbon pricing in the UK was trying to drive innovation, but everyone is expecting carbon pricing to be high, and then businesses will try to think, okay, how to be competitive in this by investing in the right technologies and doing other things. So I think we have very good industrial sectors in the UK. We just need to ensure they are competitive, not to offshore them to other countries, because it doesn't make sense if we shut down our blast furnaces, and then other countries will build blast furnaces again for steel production.
Thank you very much. And just to promote your report, where can they find it? Where can people find it?
It will be available, I think, open access in the Energy Policy Journal, and it's already published in the IBBC Twitter page.
Indeed, thank you very much. Coming again to Sabih here, we were talking about the cost and the pricing of bringing down the cost. From an engineering point of view, you were talking about reducing the cost of concrete and transport. Based on the pricing things, is there a driver there to reduce these costs?
Absolutely, as I mentioned. Absolutely. As I mentioned in my talk, that the construction industry, we're lagging behind in adopting and embracing new technology. We're just above the agricultural industry. And we still use Victorian tools to build our roads. And therefore, there is a huge opportunity for us to improve the construction industry, from recycling and reducing the waste within the construction industry. There is a lot of waste in the construction industry, and the biggest one is the rework, and that has huge impact on the cost of material and the extension of time for the project. One issue we're facing as a construction industry is productivity. We're lacking behind productivity, and therefore there is huge potential to improve on productivity. And we, as ICE, as Institution of Civil Engineering, working on this when we published a number of papers on how to enhance productivity. Renewables, we're still lagging behind of using renewables on our sites, in our construction industry. We have to improve the method of how we manufacture our materials, how we manufacture our elements, and the precasting is becoming more and more used within the construction industry. And lately, we start using 3D printing. 3D printing is being widely used. China is using a lot of 3D printing. And in UAE in Sharjah, the first 3D printed villa is built in Sharjah, and it's available for people to visit. But the biggest improvement within the construction industry, which, as I said, reduce the waste in the construction, is the BIM, Building Information Management. And Building Information Management made it very easy to collaborate between all stakeholders within the design process, with the manufacturing process, and with the client. And therefore, one issue in the building is that you have clashes, when you have utilities clashes, and it's very difficult to identify sometimes at the design process. But with the BIM, you'll be able to see all the clashes, and that would reduce the rework. And if you allow you to do redesign, change design faster, without missing the communication. And the digital twin. The digital twin is basically you have your asset, your building, your bridge, whatever you have, and you have the twin of it, which is in digital format. And therefore, again, this enhanced the collaboration between all the stakeholders. Plus, in the future, when you pass on your asset to your client, whoever going to operate and maintain this asset has all the information he needs, and it makes it very easy to access the information when there is a defect on the asset, and it's very easy to access any spare part, because already you have the specification of spare parts, and if you have links with the manufacturer, with the supplier, within a touch of button, that could be done. On the IC side, one of the biggest issue is the client education, and I think this would work for the Iraqi government. We set up the Enable on Better Infrastructure guidelines, which basically give the client the way to assess your assets need before you implement the asset. And that's what we as an institution, we try to help the clients, and we work with New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and South Africa on enabling better infrastructure. And I personally try to push to get help support for the Iraq government, because a lot of projects is going to be started from scratch. And one thing we have to remember, there is opportunity for us as civil engineering. 60% of buildings have not been built yet. 60% of the required building for 2050 has not been built yet. And if we can take this opportunity to improve our process, the way we implement, the way we operate and maintain our assets, this is going to be a game changer for the construction industry.
Thank you very much. It strikes me that there's some simple things we can do. Just collaborate better, modernizing working practices should save a good percentage. I'm quite interested also in this 3D printing. Why would that be saving energy and carbon footprint, out of interest?
The reason for 3D, because if you imagine you're printing a house, what you're going to print is the material we need. There is no waste. That's from the waste point. Health and safety. You're not going to have any. You reduce your health and safety on site. Plus using advanced materials, which new technology, new materials. You have stronger materials, less material, less cement, less aggregate, and so on.
And Hussam was talking earlier about really reducing the amount of energy footprint in aluminium, for example. I mean, could you foresee how much reduction you can make fairly quickly by better collaborative working, possibly using some of Batoul's technology tools to manage it? What sort of guess could you imagine the reduction of percentage would be in terms of building energy and carbon footprint?
I mean, as I said, the collaborative tools is reduce the rework from the cost point of view and the materials. And trust me, I've seen clashes when worked on a project where you have part of the project and the utilities were half meter different. They don't. Yes, are come which project do exist, or the MEP engineer decided to relocate the access for the utilities from one corner to the other corner without involving the structural engineer. And the structural engineer is going constructing, and when they get on site, basically the access for the utilities on opposite.
So this digital twin idea will allow you to understand exactly what's happening anywhere, anytime, and the whole thing is much more efficient. And I'm getting a strong sense that companies that are going to embrace this modern ways of working, use of technology, are going to be more efficient, better companies, far less carbon footprint, and possibly more profitable at the end of the day.
I give you I said at the beginning, I work on operation and maintenance of assets, and therefore when we used to do inspection of any bridge structure on highway, the amount of work you need to do just desktop of research to get all the information. And if you're lucky, if you can't find information, because sometimes the last thing we do as a construction industry is build drawings, and if there is any as-built drawings, they don't match with the reality. Therefore, with the digital twin, you know where everything is, and you know the specification for that project, and therefore it makes life easier for you as a client and as a.
Thank you very much. Can I just check if Hussam is still here?
Yes.
Hello, Hussam.
Hi.
Interested in the digital twin. Do you have a digital twin when you're designing your buildings? And I hope you heard what Sabih said there. Will you be integrating some of his technologies into what you're doing as well?
Look, as I know, I mean, Zaha Hadid was one of the innovative designers in the world. I mean, Zaha was using 3D production since 40 years. And I remember when I joined her 2026, we never really thought about a building in 2D. We always think about it in 3D. When we design it, we know exactly where the column is going to be and how thick it's going to be. And then we bring all the ceiling, the MEP, the facade, the line, maybe the slope edge. I mean, all of that, actually, I'm using technical terms, but all of this information, as Dr. Sabah said, you need to know all of them. You put it visually, and then the industry follow up, and then they start using the BIM, which is like building information management, right? And then exactly like you identify the clashes, and then you find a solution, and you don't leave it to the contractor to find, like, as Dr. Sabah said, maybe silly solution, not really efficient, could maybe cost at least material. Forget about the money and the claim and everything. Will cost you like more materials. So by doing that, you will be more efficient. I will add to this. You know, in any project, especially in high-rise buildings, you want to do what we call it wind tunnel test. That is going to reduce, because engineers, they design in best practice, and definitely what they design for, it's going to be really buildable. But when you do wind tunnel test, you are going to optimize the size of all elements, and this is where you save the materials. On top of that, when we use a 3D printing, it's really exactly you print and you use the material you use. The example I showed, that you don't need to have this node fully solid. You really like you study it structurally, and then you build it, and then you test it. And that's what you are going to do. So I think the world is really heading in the right direction and all of that. But to be able, as company, as supplier, to be able really to invest more your money and time and knowledge in producing these materials, you need to know, like, a certain countries or a certain developers or a client really want this production. Like NEOM for now, they want it. And then everybody like encouraged everyone in the world to do it. So what the Iraqi government needs to do, as maybe in Britain, soon BIM is going to be really required for any submission as part of your application. You have really to show the BIM production and BIM, or actually all your submission and document need to be submitted as BIM model, for instance. As soon as it became a law, everybody will follow it. Because as you know, developer, they are really keen to build as less as possible in terms of cost and then make more profit, which is actually, it's their right. They can do that. But as soon as you have to make this as part of legislation, and then everybody will follow. And you as a client, you should be aim to accept that, okay, my building is going to cost maybe 8% more, 6% more. It doesn't matter, right? I'm okay. I'm willing to lose like spend more money, and then where if I make sure like I will save the world in a way, or whatever vision you need to have, you need to accept it, you need to apply it, and as government you need to make it part of the law, and then of course and then you encourage everyone really to be in the right track and then follow your vision.
So really, political will is very important here. You know, it's driven by the Saudi government, could be driven by the Iraqi government, might be driven by the UK government. Political will is the driver behind this, with the regulations that are going to ensure people conform. What's your reading of how that is? I mean, you have a scope, international view of building, for example. I mean, do you get a sense of which areas are conforming to this and which ones are absolutely not?
Look, in a way, I think, as Dr. Sabah said, he actually mentioned so many really right things. In a way, educating the client, it's important. So I remember in one of projects I was leading in Zaha, that we were convincing the client we have to use BIM. And then for him, no, we're not going to use BIM now. I will use it maybe after the stage. And then we're explaining it's really important. And then they didn't really accept our offer to do it. And then we accept okay, we are going to invest. We are going to do it because we know it's going to be good for us and the client. At least like for us, definitely it's going to be important. So we decided to do BIM, and we built the first 2 stages in BIM in our own expenses until the client realized, you were really right. And this is how I'm going to get it. And then when we were doing, like we are like also telling him, when the contractor came on board and then he tried really adjust the design, you will have as build model. And this is where it's going to be helpful for you for maintenance. So it took part of our fee to invest, where we are going to convince the client it's better for you, but I can assure you it's really better for us and easier for us as designers to use the BIM. So it's a bit of everybody really, you have to do that. You know, we have to start from ourselves as designers, or maybe as engineers, and then expert in sustainability, to apply that and educate everyone.
Thank you very much. It's all about leadership at the end of the day, isn't it? Obviously, you've taken the initiative and will probably benefit because of that. So thank you, Hussam. Talking of which, I'm going to Batoul now, because BIM is a new concept for me, and it could be the sort of thing that you might have software for at all, or how do you manage the supply chains of people and enable the information that manages projects?
Let me first touch point on how we are actually using, for example, digital that we were talking about, not only in mitigating risk of planned buildings, but also existing infrastructure. We actually have a live example where we have partnered with the Norwegian Public Road Administration, where we are using the technology to mitigate any climate risks, but also look at aspects that the regular inspection may have missed, but we are able to capture it through the digital twin, for example. I would like also to touch upon a couple of facts when it comes to what is happening in Iraq. What is the actual climate impact that we are facing in Iraq in particular? There was a recent announcement by the IOM talking about the climate change impact on population. In Iraq, 13% of the population in central and southern Iraq where they had to be displaced. They faced displacement between 2016 up to 2022. So these climate changes and environmental degradation is leading to direct displacement of population. The agricultural sector, for example, in Iraq, which is the biggest contributor to the GDP overall, next after the oil and gas sector, it also employs about 20% of the entire population. All the farmers in Iraq, thousands of farmers, are actually being forced to abandon, to leave their farms, their lands, and this is adding an additional pressure on the overall economy, but also on the overall life cycle. While Iraq is not a major contributor to carbon emission, it's only contributing to 0.02%. But Iraq is one of the countries that is facing severe consequences from the climate change. The most important two lines of life, the two rivers of Iraq, Tigris and Euphrates, could run dry by 2040 because of all the declining water levels and the climate change. It's really important that we actually start acting now. And there is no lack of attention from the government of Iraq. The COP28 Iraq delegation, you saw representation from all sectors of Iraq, from finance to environment to investment, etc. And there has been actually a very important announcement that will enable all these efforts, that will make those projects possible in Iraq, particularly. I don't know if you heard about the announcement of the Green Sustainable Bank in Iraq. The Iraq Minister of Environment said at COP recently, a few days ago, that CBI, the Commercial Bank of Iraq, has approved the establishment of the Green Bank of Iraq, and this will be able to finance all these projects, all the green and sustainability projects in Iraq. Technology is definitely an enabler. It will definitely make it happen. It's important for us to start as companies, as we all need to start treating carbon like money. We have to record, the companies need to record the movement of carbon when it enters their system and leaves their system, just like the way you do any monetary transaction. You actually record it, and then eventually you can balance your carbon books the same way that you can balance your financial books. Eventually, you can actually have it synced in one single ledger between financial and carbon.
Because that leads on beautifully again back to Owais, because he's looking at all the internal carbon measures. You've got solutions there, and presumably you're also looking in Iraq in terms of how they're going to quantify and manage these things. I mean, Owais, you know, how far is Iraq along that journey? What do they need to do next?
I think Ahmed's already touched upon that we're not seeing any progress in terms of a carbon pricing policy or any sort of mechanism at a national level. But again, I mean, like I said, it happens or it doesn't happen. If you look at some of the sectors, for example, coming back to the energy sector, oil and gas sector, it's an export-oriented sector. So it doesn't matter if Iraq has it or not at a national level. The markets that the product is being exported to has some sort of, may likely have some sort of carbon pricing regime already in place. It's a matter of how much investment you're willing to make in country to decarbonize your operations or to decarbonize your product. That is very important. A couple of points I would like to mention that came up during the discussion the last few minutes. First thing is that, Ashley, you made a comment that by taking so-and-so measures or steps, it's good for business. It brings in additional revenue as well. Equally important is license to operate. So as we see the regulatory frameworks globally transform and evolve, it's also a matter of survival that the companies, the entities, they need to think about. So there are various aspects to it and various motivations. Then we focused a lot around technology, the different sort of types of technology that can become an enabler for decarbonization. I think at the core of it sits data, and it is ever so important, and that is nothing new. It's just lying around. Data is just there. And we've seen it through and through across countries and entities that they don't know what data they have. And even if they do, they don't know what to do with it. And I believe, Batoul, I guess you're the best person to talk about it from an ERP standpoint. But it's really important to focus on data. First is to capture the right data, to process it in a right manner, and then to analyze it in the right manner as well. So through and through that value chain, I think perhaps spending a few minutes on the importance of data and the role that it can play, I think it's also very important.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, and Ahmed, I think you've got a role here because you've been collecting data too, haven't you?
Yeah, we basically collected data for all the UK 1,000 industrial sites, basically understanding their energy and their emissions. But I think Owais and Batoul touched into like a very good points that I just want to respond to. So yesterday I was talking with the Prime Minister advisor for Iraq on creating some central modeling for the UK government. For the Iraqi government, sorry. And they said, yeah, let's do it. I said, okay, where's the data? Because without data, you can't do modeling. I need data about the electricity sector, where are the plants are, how big the plants, special information about the oil and gas field, where they are. If we want to invest, we want to find the optimal location that maximize the price, for example. We want data about the transport sector. How many cars are there? What are the types of the cars? All of these we model out the CCC very carefully and in a detailed way. Our modeling will inform the UK government policy and will inform the funding that is needed. That's billions of pounds going into probably the wrong industry if your models are wrong. So that's a very important issue. Another thing is, which Batoul mentioned about the displaced people, which I very much agree with. So we basically hear sometimes that you have, two sides of the same coin related to the climate change, which is mitigation and adaptation. But in fact, when it comes to people, they are very different, because mitigation technologies and the project can happen and can be run overseas. So somebody in the UK can have a project and lead the project and install the technology in Iraq without coming to Iraq. But adaptation is a very different story. It requires very careful planning and stakeholder engagement with the Iraqi people themselves, because these people will adapt to the climate change. These people that will migrate, so you'll have to, run a capacity building program, do very different things in the adaptation side, which we need in Iraq, because, Iraq is one of the countries that is mostly affected by climate change. So we prioritize adaptation, we do what we need to do, and then in the mitigation side, we act in line with our nationally determined contribution, and probably we go more from there.
Thank you very much. And Sabih, would you like to comment on the data?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, everyone talk about carbon footprint, carbon emission, but we haven't got yet an agreed method of calculating footprint for infrastructure. How we calculate the carbon footprint, each country, each institution has different. But we, as ICE, we set up, the guidelines, and it's been adopted by British Standard Institution. And there is now a tools to calculate, not just to calculate the carbon footprint infrastructure, but also how to enhance and reduce the carbon footprint of civil infrastructure.
Very interesting. Owais, do you have this tool? Would you have your own tools, or how does that work?
No, it's customized. Well, not even customized. It's bespoke. It depends on the situation, the client, the industry, and the types of data that is available. So it is very situational, and you hit the nail on the head. It's absolutely right. There are various calculation methods, established calculation methods. It's a matter of selecting any one and just living by it. But we don't see the level of maturity that one would expect. There is still a lot of trial and error going on. But absolutely, there is no one consistent methodology that everyone is aligned to.
Okay, thank you. Sabih, yes?
Very quickly, apologies. I talked about how the way we're going to do it, but the standard is PAS 2080, which is a British standard institution collaboration with the institution of civil engineering. This is one of the standards widely used to calculate carbon footprint.
Okay, and they can find that on your website. The ICE, is it there available?
Yes.
Fantastic.
It's available on the ICE and British standard and free to download.
Okay, and I'd just like to bring in Hussam again. Hussam, would you like to comment on data before I'm going to wrap up in a minute? Are you there, Hussam? He may be having trouble connecting. Okay, so I'm going to start the end. It sounds like one data to rule the world, to quote Lord of the Rings, as it were.
Sorry, Ashley, I'm here.
And I think maybe who would like to maybe Hussam, hello, you come back.
Yeah, I don't know why you can't see my photo. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, the data is the most important. I mean, I will go on the earlier comment regarding the transportation. In all master plans we do, we use companies that really expert in transportation module. One of them I call Systematica, and they have around like 34 years only in that. That will allow you to somehow really like envisage how many car trips you will have in the road and how much really you want to do like car parking for visitors and everything to use. More important, when you want to design a master plan, you will consider how you are going to minimize the movement from place A to B. And one of the solution was like how we make the mixed use development more sustainable. I mean, in my to be honest, in my master degree, my thesis was how the mixed use development make the city more sustainable. In a way, if you live and entertain and work in your neighborhood within like 20 minutes walking distance, you don't need really to use the car. That's really important, that how to use all of these data and comparison. When you want to come to the client, you convince him that rather than you are going to use all of these footprint for cars to movement, like you would use it for something else, which will be better for the environment, the people, to entertain them, to make it more friendly to use. So definitely the data, it's really important. And I would say like using the new technology with the simulation study and all different aspects. I mean, we'll talk about the BIM, we'll talk about the material, the structure and all of that. And then giving like simulation, how to design master plans and building and everything, it's also equally important. So this is my comment. You are muted.
Thank you very much. I've learned a lot today. I've learned about BIMs, digital twins, data, simulations, lots of elements here, carbon pricing. There's a whole world and ecology of information and data. Batoul, would you like to just sort of sum up for your point of view how you bring all the data together for people, for example, and what's available? Maybe it's you, and then maybe Sabih, you might want to summarize, and then Owais, and then maybe Ahmed.
Right. So I think currently the biggest evolution in corporate sustainability solution is definitely happening at data. The sustainability data is increasingly critical in the entire business decision-making process and across the entire supply value chain. So as I have mentioned, and I'm re-emphasizing the message, companies need to improve their carbon accounting. We need to go beyond regulation and reporting. We need to think of an end-to-end, an entire vision for a low carbon circular economy. Because of standardizing this data and capturing this data the same way we capture money, we start to have the mindset of treating carbon like money as businesses. We will be able to eventually have a sustainable business investment, and it will definitely help in the decision making. I'd like to call out with regards to events. Thanks to one of the colleagues who's apparently joining us online. Bassem, thank you so much for having our back. He just mentioned that as I say, we do have a solution. It's there in the chat. We do have a solution on thing.
Thank you very much. Sabih, would like to finish off?
Yes, we talked a lot over the construction industry, and it just come to my mind when Hussam mentioned the 20 minutes and you don't need a car. I think in order to reduce our carbon footprint, we have to think of public transport. Without reliable, affordable public transport, we will not be able to reduce our carbon footprint. And one aspect of the transport systems, people don't think, but I think it's more and more become relevant, first and last mile. I used to travel between Dubai and Doha. My flight is 45 minutes, but I need 2 hours before, 2 hours after to finish my journey. And therefore, when we think of a transport system, we have to think of it as experience, first and last mile. And therefore, a public transport system, affordable, will reduce our carbon footprint and also help health and safety of humanity.
And I think that's something Iraq could certainly do more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe you're the man.
I'm more than happy to step in. It's my home country,
Yes.
and I would love to participate as much as I can, even a little. But it would be an honor to do that.
Thank you. Owais, would you like to summarize your thoughts?
Yeah, I think very briefly, it's a matter of bringing in best practices into Iraq. Yes, we talk about political will, government taking the first step, and all of that, but we also know the priorities for the government in Iraq. It's not easy for them, and it's not easy for the people as well. But if you look at the operators and the entities that operate inside Iraq, and if we look at their global footprint and what they do elsewhere, they're quite mature. Their operations are quite mature, and the way they approach this problem is also quite structured and tried and tested. It's a matter of now bringing all of that into Iraq, and they may already be doing so. I haven't looked at what's happening in Iraq within the private sector more recently, but whatever we talked about, these are all established practices, techniques, technologies, and ways of operating. It's a matter of now importing that into Iraq and applying.
Presumably, that's something you can do.
More than happy to.
Yes,
Always.
fantastic.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. And Ahmed, hello. Final thoughts from you, please.
Yes, so I think my advice for the Iraqi government is to create a central institution that has the right power to design energy policies and to mitigate climate change risk, whether they are physical or transition risk, and have the right tools to inform their policies. And I think with that, they can create a very good policy to support the private sector and set the scene for businesses by knowing when and how to invest in the right technologies.
And I think if you're here tomorrow, you might be able to meet Farid Yassin, who's the climate envoy, in our business sessions. So maybe you could have a word with him about that.
We chatted in Iraq like a month ago, and he's certainly the right person to lead Iraq. Initiatives on climate change.
And then you could be joined up with Batoul here on SAP, getting the data together, and of course work with Owais here. So it could be a good team, actually, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. And finally, Hussam, dreaming of wonderful things, ways to reduce the carbon footprint of the world, and also delight people at the same time. Maybe you'd like to sum up finally from your point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the team here that maybe it's a bit of challenge now, like to apply it and force it to people where you have different, let's say maybe challenges. But one way could be you encourage the private sector that if you, or developers, if you build a building which is more sustainable, or you achieve something, like the government will give you something additional. Like rather than you could build 100,000 square meter, okay, if you do that, I will give you 20,000 square meter free of charge or something. You will, of course, they will spend more money as developer, but in the other hand, they will make more profit, and then that's going to be everybody happy. Try to find this solution, encourage people to do it, and then when you do it, then the next generation in 5 years' time, they will be. It became a habit for them, and then it became adaptable, and then the government even changing from private sector to become part of the government. It will be like by habit they will apply all of that, and then it will move smoother to be more sustainable. This is one way I can approach it.
Thank you very much. So there's two things that cross my mind. One is data, and we have all the data, and the second thing is human behavior. As always, it boils down to those two things, information and the behavior. So with that thought, I'd like to thank all of the panelists for your great wisdom. This will be available online, so you can watch it again many times if you like, and share it with your friends and people that need to know about these things. And I'd like to thank you all very much indeed, one by one. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you too for those of you who are watching.
Sure.
That's the end.
Thank you.